Okay, let's talk about what had to happen, what's still going to happen. The Padres, home field advantage, wild card round. They will face either the Mets or probably the Atlanta Braves. It's a weird set of circumstances. The Mets and Atlanta in a doubleheader today. If one of these teams wins both ends of the doubleheader, the winning team is in and Arizona gets in. If they split the doubleheader, Arizona goes and plays golf tomorrow. Somebody's coming to San Diego. We think it's the winner of the first game today. Somebody's going to have to go to Milwaukee to play the Brewers in the other wild card game. So then it takes us to John's big question. Which is the toughest team to face? Well, the Padres, I think, are the most complete team in Major League Baseball. I wouldn't want to face the Padres, period, exclamation point right now, because of starting rotation, because of everyday lineup, because of bench bunch, and because of Mike Shildt. I think the Padres are really, really dangerous. But let's just presuppose it is the Mets. The Mets have got Peter Alonso and the home run hitting shortstop Francisco Lindor. Power hitting third baseman in Mark Vientos. They got Marte, the hot hitting young catcher Alvarez. And they've got a unique collection of journeyman pitchers who have had bounce back seasons. I would have never thought a rotation that would have included Sean Manaea, Jose Quintana, and some of these other guys. We'd still be playing baseball in October, but there we are. The Mets are really, really a complete ball club. Not equal to the Padres, but pretty good. Atlanta. They've gone from top of the hotel balcony, we're about to go to the wild card series, to lying face down in the basement. This game with the Mets, this first game of the doubleheader, back and forth, absolutely amazing. And they're still playing as we take the air. But Atlanta's dangerous. They got Marcell Ozuna, and they got Matt Olson, and they got this home run hitting hero today, Ozzie Albies, and they got Jorge Soler. And that pitching staff, wow. We think the Padres have a good staff. Well, they got Chris Sale and Max Fried at the front end of that rotation, and they got Ray Lopez back off the disabled list right now. Atlanta's a really dangerous team. Arizona. Here's a big issue with the D-backs. They've been battered by injuries the back third of the season. They finally have their full batting order back, but they're not hitting the way they were before Christian Walker went out, before Gabe Moreno went out. It's just not quite the same Arizona team. But from a pitching staff perspective, they got dangerous people. There's no doubt about it. Zach Gallen is as good as it gets in terms of being your number one starter. But it's been weird. They gave big money to Jared Montgomery. They gave big money to Eduardo Rodriguez, and both have scuffled with injuries. Neither one has been dominant. Neither one's earning the kind of money that they're being paid. So I'm not sure Arizona is really ready for postseason play this season, considering that those guys went to the World Series last year. So it spins us back to the first game of today's Mets-Atlanta doubleheader, where Atlanta was leading 3-0 in the eighth inning. Spencer Schellenbach was pitching really well. He had an 11-pitch at-bat, and he gave up a double, and he was gassed. They took him out. The bullpen imploded. Joe Jimenez and Raisel Iglesias absolutely blew up in a Mets 6-run eighth inning. So Atlanta was going from a 3-0 lead to a 6-3 deficit, and Atlanta came back in the bottom of the eighth inning and retook the lead. Ozzie Albies, who had hit a 2-run home run earlier, came back with a 3-run screaming line drive, bases loaded double to give Atlanta the lead 7-6. So they're going to the ninth inning right now. Atlanta wins, they're in. Mets still have to play a second game of a doubleheader. They can get into the second game of the Twin Bill if they win that. So those are the storylines, this street corner, if you will. Now, the other street corner is Milwaukee sitting there, day off. The Brewers won 93 games this season. I would have never have imagined that, considering they lost virtually the whole pitching staff. But Willy Adames, the shortstop, has had a phenomenal comeback player of the year season. William Contreras has hit a ton of home runs. And this young shortstop, Jackson Chourio, has hit with power. He's been the equivalent of what Jackson Merrill's been to the Padres. Milwaukee playing at home is going to be dangerous for anybody going in there. So, John, that's where we are. Do you want to give us an update on the out-of-town scoreboard? Has Atlanta won? Have the Mets rallied back? Where are we in that first game of the doubleheader?
Well, according to the sports ticker here, it just ended right now. So the Mets won 8-7. They just finished the full 9-inning slate, and I guess they're going to go take a break and come back in about an hour or so. That was a crazy game. I mean, that's like unbelievable back and forth from the 8th and in the 9th.
Now, here's the big issue. Atlanta loses this lead twice and loses at home. Now you got a big question. Atlanta has to win the second game to have a postseason. And now Atlanta has to burn Chris Sale 17-3 and start him today rather than the first game of the wild card series. That's a real setback for the Atlanta Braves. Can they do it? Sure. Sale's been unbelievably dominant. He's had his own career bounce back season too. But what a blow. So the Mets are in, and I would assume that means the Mets are coming to San Diego regardless of what happens the second game doubleheader.
Again, there's so many ifs and thens. I get confused by it all, but that sounds right. And you look at both these teams, you're like, which one do you want? And, like pick your poison.
So which one do you think is the scariest one for the Padres to face?
Well, if you asked me a month ago, I would have said the Diamondbacks. But now I'm not really sure. I'm like, I just remember Chris Sale when he pitched against the Padres, he just took them out. I mean, and besides, the Padres aren't so good against lefties. I'm worried about that. But beyond Chris Sale, the Braves look like a team that might be easier to defeat. There is no Acuna, rather than the Mets, who just are seen like they're red hot.
Yeah, and it's hard for me. I look at the Mets and I say, how are they doing this? How is this possible? The Mets to do this, considering they got a bunch of journeymen in their pitching rotation. They don't have the number one starter. Kodai Senga has not pitched all season long. I mean, this is really stunning to me. But it's a 26-man roster. You come together in this season, and the Mets collectively, there's not a lot of stars on that team outside of Lindor and maybe Alonso sometimes when he hits home runs when he's not batting .241. The Mets don't have a ton of stars on their roster, and yet they're right there on the brink.
Yeah, and I think they're still paying Bobby Bonilla.
Yeah.
But it's the grimace. That's what it is, Lee. The grimace has kicked these guys off. So it might be a rematch of 2022 wild card series.
Okay, that's where we are. It looks as if the Mets are coming to San Diego to play the Padres. They still have a second game of the doubleheader to play. Atlanta has to win that to get into postseason. And Arizona, they're rooting for somebody to sweep this thing. They're rooting for the Mets to win it so Arizona can be in postseason play. Okay, as long as we're talking baseball, let's